Welcome to In a World with Real Media. I'm your host, Brad Burrow. In this podcast, we'll dive into the lives of the most successful people in business. We'll learn how they overcame adversity, took advantage of opportunities, and learned from their experiences. Learn from our experts, get inspired, then go live your story. It's In a World with Real Media. Hello and welcome to the In a World with Real Media podcast. I'm Brad Burrow. Today we have a special guest. I've really been looking forward to having you on. So this is Julie Sayers. Julie is the principal and owner of Encompas, and we're going to talk a lot about, I have a lot of questions about Encompas, but also she is the mayor of the city of Lenexa. Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So that's
Good morning.
Awesome to have you here. So I've got a whole bunch of questions, but I really wanted to kind of dive into first a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up. You know, I know you went to KU, so give me the 411 on your background.
Yeah, my parents were actually from the area. Both sets of my grandparents lived in the Kansas City area, but my parents moved to Topeka because my dad got a job with the VA in Topeka after dental school and started a dental practice there in Topeka. With several other partners, yes.
Okay, awesome.
So they put down roots in Topeka. That's where I grew up. And at the time, you know, Topeka high schools, you kind of were choosing between KU and K-State, and KU just felt more like me. So, because I knew I wanted to study.
So do you go east or west? East or west, right?
Right, yes. A lot of my classmates were going to K-State, and I just felt like KU was a better choice for me. I was interested in the arts, maybe thinking about going to law school at the time, and just kind of thought that Lawrence made more sense for who I was. So got my degree in interior design and practiced here in Kansas City for 8 years with a firm then called Ellerbe Becket, was later purchased by AECOM, but designing NBA and NFL sports facilities for the first part of my career, and spent a lot of time traveling throughout the country and the world working on those facilities.
Okay, we got to hear more about that.
Yes.
So just to give you a little bit of background,
Yeah, of
Real
course.
Media. So we've been in business since 97, but our first 10, 15 years, all we did was animation and work for sports stadiums.
Okay.
So, you know, the ribbon boards and the...
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So were you designing, what was your role in designing stadiums?
Yeah, so a stadium is really kind of 17 projects within the same building. You know, there's a healthcare component, there's locker rooms, there's several different restaurants, fan experiences, hospitality, you know, all sorts of parts of those buildings. And an interior designer sort of touches and has control over designing those spaces and those experiences. So some of the notable projects that I worked on in that time were the renovation of the Superdome after Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, wow.
The new then basketball arena at the University of Oregon, which was named after Phil Knight's son, because he was obviously one of the founders and, you know, influential character at the University of Oregon. And then I finished my career there working on the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. So didn't quite get to see the building open, but was mostly through construction at the time that I left AECOM.
So I know a lot of the people that run the video boards in the production areas for those arenas. Barclays is one of them, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just watched Air last night. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
You made me think of that with Phil Knight. You know, so that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So, did you know when you were growing up that you had kind of a creative outlet that you needed to?
Yeah, for sure. I had a really wonderful influence in my grandfather, who was a graphic designer. His business in Lenexa was a printing and graphic design company. Yes, and you know, he was always making things and making music, and had a really cool bar in their basement. He was sort of an entertainer and a showman. So he definitely was a big influence in both my brother and I becoming creatives as adults.
Do you remember going to the print shop when you were little?
Yeah, for sure. My mom and I have actually tried to find the building in Lenexa, and so much has changed that we've not been able to locate it. But we know that it was somewhere near Old Town in Lenexa. So we'll find it someday.
Boy, Lenexa's changing. I want to talk a lot about that. That's really amazing what's happening in Lenexa.
Thank you.
That's cool. So you kind of just inherited some of those genes.
Yeah. I mean, when you have someone that's that influential in your life so young, sort of encouraging creativity, I think that's a really strong influence to sort of help start that fire.
So went to KU.
Yep.
And then got your degree and started. What was your first job out of college?
So it was Ellerbe Becket.
Oh, it was.
So
okay.
started right away with the these big sort of
Jump right in, huh?
giant projects, yes, and traveling the country, working on those. And then just really felt like I wasn't connected to the local community because I was spending so much time on the road. And I knew the former owners of Encompass because I had worked on projects with them. So kind of let them know that I was looking to make a change, maybe slow down a little bit in my 30s and stay, closer to Kansas City. So I started with them in 2011. And worked as a project manager for them until we started negotiations for 4 of us to purchase the company last year.
So Encompass has been around a long time.
Mm-hmm. It actually was the merger of 2 different companies, in the early 2000s. It's been there have been Hayworth furniture dealers in Kansas City for a long time, but Encompass now has been around for almost 20 years.
So tell me what Encompass does. It's Contract Furnishings.
Yep.
I know is kind of in your LinkedIn profile a little bit. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's something that not a lot of people sort of know a lot about. So commercial furniture for large-scale office buildings, commercial spaces, airports, universities is a different kind of furniture than what you would see in residential settings or that you could buy at Nebraska Furniture Mart. And it's distributed in much the same way that cars are. So there are 3 or 4 kind of major manufacturers that are located in West Michigan. And all of that is distributed through
Michigan.
Yeah. Manufacturing in Michigan, it's, the sort of the bedrock of our country.
All right.
And all of that is distributed through a network of dealers similar to the ways that cars are. So you go to a Ford dealer, you go to a Chevy dealer, you go to a Hayworth dealer, which is what we represent. And then there's Miller Knoll, Steelcase, other companies that have dealer networks as well. So, and that's just really because the procurement process is very complicated. It's, a lot of parts and pieces and logistics and trucking and things that organizations tend to not want to do themselves. It's up to us to coordinate all of that.
And your orders are pretty significant.
They can be,
yes.
yes.
I mean, if you're, redoing a whole office or something like that.
Yeah.
So how hard is it to get a dealership for a company like that? I mean, you have to be around for a long time for them to even consider giving you a dealership, right?
Yeah, I mean, the 4 of us have a combined level of experience. I think we did the math once that the 4 of us have something like 70 years of experience in the industry, because there are even certain niches within that. There's sales to government entities that work in a very different contractual way. We have an expert on that. One of my partners is an expert on that. And then just, maintaining your current accounts and servicing everyone that we do business with. Obviously, going out and developing new business is sort of a task all of its own.
Yeah.
And then, just managing all of our staff and keeping it all going. So.
You got a lot of...
Indeed.
And we're not even talking about mayor stuff yet.
Yes.
Did you ever think you'd be an owner? Like when you decided to slow down a little bit in your 30s and thought, well, I'd like to own this someday. Did that ever even cross your mind?
It really didn't. I sort of have never been the type of person that has goals in the way that, like, by the time I'm 30, I want to be doing X, or by the time I spend so much time with this company, I want to be responsible for Y. I just sort of take opportunities as they come my way. I try to, sort of, work hard and make sure that I'm still, engaged in the work. Mm-hmm. And then I say yes. I've been fortunate to, have opportunities like this presented to me, and just had the sort of gut feeling to say yes.
Are you a gut feeling decision maker?
Yeah, kind of. I think, when people see potential in you, you sort of have to listen to that. And that's definitely how I ended up with both positions.
It's kind of a little bit of a sidetrack. Have you ever done a Colby test?
I haven't.
Okay, so it's a kind of a personality thing, but my Colby says that I'm a gut decision maker.
Okay.
Like I make my best decisions when I do it based on my gut. I bet you're the same way, and maybe it's a creative person thing.
Yeah, it's just kind of this intuition that's well, and then certainly feedback that you get from others about, hey, I really think that you would be good at this. You kind of have to listen to that.
I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast because everybody's going to say, oh, no. But, I think I do better that way. Mm-hmm. If I don't do that, then I tend to overthink.
Yeah.
It's like struggle with decisions.
Yep.
Are you the same way?
Yeah. There's the movie Free Solo, about the gentleman that free soloed El Capitan, climbed it with no ropes. The director of that film did an interesting masterclass, when we were stuck at home in COVID watching masterclasses.
Yeah.
And I think his name is Jimmy Chin. He's just sort of this really amazing photographer and filmmaker. And one of the things that he said during that really stuck with me is that in any sort of big endeavor, you have to commit and then figure out the details. And I think that that's a lot of how this has all come together for me, was where like someone asked me to, fulfill an opportunity, and I committed to those things, and then I'm figuring out the details as I go.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So it's taking you places that you never would have thought that you might go.
Yeah. You just have to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm kind of like that too. So tell me, why do you like Contract Furnishings? What was it about that business that?
Yeah. So having worked as an interior designer, you are sort of responsible for setting the broad vision of a project, sort of understanding the goals and the function and all of that. And then there are sort of those big visions, and then there's a lot of detailed execution that goes into coordinating with all your consultants and getting construction documents done. And I always felt like I was better at that side, the nuts and bolts side, the execution of projects. And that's really what we end up doing on the end of a project when it comes to time to install furniture. Is the vision's already been set, everything hopefully has already been coordinated, the contract documents are done, and it's our responsibility to come in and sort of execute on that last 10%, 20% of what the vision is, make sure that the function is perfect, and that humans really are interacting with that environment at their most, making them the most capable.
See, I would have thought you would be a vision person.
Yeah.
But you're more on the details and the execution side.
Yeah. I think in my career, I find that just the day-to-day operation, execution is what I'm the strongest at, because I'm just sort of a project manager by nature. I have the ability, though, to sort of see the broad picture because of my background in interior design, having that muscle memory, I guess.
Yeah.
Being able to understand the vision and see the vision, I think, is where my two worlds now kind of make sense to one another, because you have to be able to do both in both positions.
So I have to ask you this question. So the contract furnishing world has probably changed a lot since COVID.
Yeah.
Not only from how we do business, I mean, our business has changed too, but also like working from home, a lot of people. Has that changed kind of your approach to?
Yeah, I mean, I think
and the manufacturer's approach.
For sure. It is now a conversation about making an office an asset that people desire. They have to want to be there. They have to feel invested in the culture of a company, because it is a lot for a company sometimes to ask someone to commute to an office and to, put on pants and, and the things that we've all learned, since COVID. So the office really now has to be a destination. And a lot of our clients have come back to us during COVID and since to really think about, what does this space mean for our people? How does it make our people productive and comfortable? How is it different from working at home? What sort of technology or assets can the office offer that at-home work can't? And there's a lot of conversations still going on about that most companies do want people in the office sometimes, just to retain that connection. And how do we make it, useful for them to come and spend the time together?
My son works for a company that's a government supplier, the big one out south, and they're in the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So they've never gone back to full time in the office. Yeah, it's really interesting. So he's literally working from home 2 days a week or 3. And so do you find, like, are you building? I don't know what that would be, like helping them build at home offices as well? I mean, or resources that they can have for home?
Yeah, that's actually the conversation I think that will be much longer term as a result of the pandemic, is that ergonomics certainly was important and is important in office settings. And I don't know that organizations are talking about it enough for their people at home. When we all first packed up our stuff and we thought it was going to be 2 weeks, everyone worked at the dining room table and didn't really think that much about it.
Which is not very comfortable.
It's not at all. And it's not good for your body to be, sitting in places like that long term. So that's something that we definitely do push. If companies are sticking with a hybrid model for good, are there tools or assets that they can provide to their employees at home to make sure that they're staying healthy and not, sitting crouched, in some weird place, potentially injuring themselves in the process.
Yeah, like chairs.
Chairs and the heights of work surfaces and,
Are you getting asked things like that? I mean...
Yes, but I think not enough.
Yeah.
I think people are still thinking, if you're working from home, that's your jam. You figure out what's comfortable for you, and companies aren't necessarily providing those resources.
Do you find that you're getting asked, like the environments at work, we need to make this more exciting, more enticing, and so what do you do? What are some of the things? Pinball machines, stuff like that.
The thing I think that that we're seeing the most is food and beverage. So providing a really excellent cafe, both for providing nourishment and a place to go relax for people during the day, grab a cup of coffee, but then also for that sort of other place to work at work. Some people still like, popping into a coffee shop and working somewhere other than their desk. It sort of becomes this, kitchen for the, out at a party, everyone hangs out in the kitchen.
That's exactly right.
I think that that's sort of the new movement in corporate offices is that you've got to have a really great, it's better than a break room, some big central place where everyone can go and sort of gather and have a meeting or eat a meal or whatever it may be. So we're seeing a lot of sort of hospitality type approach to the office.
And would you help design something
absolutely.
like that?
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Have you seen the little pods?
Yeah.
I'm getting off on some tangents.
No, you're
here,
good.
But the little pods?
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm seeing those, but like they're privacy, but they have glass.
Yep.
But some of them have one like a table. Some of them just have one chair.
Yeah.
Do you do things like that?
We sure
as well?
do. That's another thing that's been super popular since pandemic because as people return to the office, they're much more aware of the settings that they're in. They can hear, like they're paying more attention to what their coworkers are doing.
Yeah.
And people are on the phone or on video calls much more often. So acoustics is a conversation that we're having with a lot of organizations, and little pods like that are ways that you can, basically put down a little mini conference room and someone can go take a meeting inside one of those or go work inside one of those if they need some heads down time. And you don't have to build a lot of infrastructure to them. So they don't require sprinklers and piping and air conditioners because they're all sort of self-contained. You just have to plug them into an outlet. So
I think they're really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a much less invasive way of sort of introducing some private space that isn't a full-blown conference room.
You add a couple of drone motors to them and you can fly to work in one of those things.
Right.
They look like a drone kind of.
Yeah.
Really, really cool stuff. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. AI. Mm-hmm. So I've been very interested in AI, since it just seems like a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. Mm-hmm. But I've seen a new program now where somebody can take a picture of their kitchen and then put it in a program, and here's some options on how you could design your kitchen. Yeah. Is that happening in
It's kind of starting. So the manufacturers, I think, all use some variety of rendering software that allows you to specify all the parts and pieces. So when you build the model, that sort of puts together the bill of materials of everything that you'd need to order.
So puts their furniture.
Yes. But then you also do renderings, to show a customer in sort of 3D views what something looks like. This is what you're going to get when you place this order.
Do you do that?
We do.
Okay.
Yes. We have, I think, 12 designers on staff, project managers that do that for our clients.
Okay.
But the conversation is, how could AI improve that process? If we say, here's a 6x6 workstation, give me 3 options in 3 different colors and put, people in it and make it look real. Yeah. Can AI help speed that process of creating all those renderings? Because it still is sort of a manual process that our people have to do now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it'll generate a look or whatever.
Yeah, you sort of give it some parameters, I think, to put the guardrails up, and then...
It's getting better all the time.
Yeah.
I remember the first few images that I did with AI, 10 fingers on one hand, and, weird stuff like that. It's like couldn't figure out things. But we're using it for a documentary on the history of women's basketball. And a lot of it's pre-Title IX, so it's like before Title IX happens in the 70s. But a lot of the pictures that are older are pretty small. So we're using AI to enhance the pictures and make them more high resolution so we can do that. So it's really a cool thing that's happening with it as well. But that it's just amazing that the capability that's continuing to come down the pike with that. So AI, are you worried about AI in your business at all? I mean, do you feel like I've had people tell me that in video production, well, we won't even need you guys in the future. We'll just, type in a prompt and bam, here's a video. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think maybe. But.
I still think that there is a place for all of our staff are interior designers. You have to ask the questions of customers to understand how their business works, what their people do. There's sort of an understanding of human factors that I'm not convinced that AI is going to be able to understand those idiosyncrasies enough to then just place an order. Like there has to be some steps in between, but I think our people are always going to be there. Certainly there's efficiencies to be found, and I think that we can get better if we can find some places to be more efficient using it. But just that sort of human understanding.
Yeah.
I'm sort of hanging my hat on needing that.
I hope you're right.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with Unreal Engine?
I'm not.
Okay. So Unreal Engine's like a gaming engine, but it's a 3D where you build a 3D environment. I was curious, we've talked about working with like J.E. Dunn and people like our companies like that, I should say, where you build in 3D maybe a floor in an office building, and then you show what it looks like at sunset, what it looks like in the morning, noon. So in Unreal Engine, you can do that, and it would be a really cool tool to show, like, here's what this furniture color looks like at 5 o'clock. Yeah. Here's what it looks at,
here's how the fabric is going to fade on all this stuff when it sits in the sun.
I'm just curious. That's probably coming in your industry, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
But, we're using it for virtual sets and, things like that, so you can put you in any environment. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So you were with Encompass for quite a few years before you actually became an owner. Can you talk about how that happened?
Yeah. So our previous owners were kind of just looking to succession plan and went through multiple iterations with that with multiple parties before us. It really didn't come together until there were 4 of us individuals that kind of fit together and really had the skill sets to, I think, complement each other in a way that the previous owners really felt comfortable making the proposal to us to buy them out. And it really has been a very symbiotic relationship. We've learned how to, capitalize on each other's strengths and fill in on some weaknesses. And I think that we make a really great team. And it's been, inspiring, frankly, to have 4 women, sort of take this over and keep it stable because it was a very successful business prior to us taking ownership. And we wanted to just make sure that everything, sort of stayed the same. And then I think that we now have the opportunity to keep building it and making it better. So.
Not easy to have 4 people get along.
Yeah, I mean, we try to disagree behind closed doors and not let our staff see any of that because we want to, obviously
stay united.
Stay united, have a positive work environment for everyone. Nobody wants to see their bosses arguing. So we figured out, sort of how to disagree respectfully and move on. And
which is okay, right?
Yeah,
it's okay to disagree. Of course, like everybody thinks differently.
Yeah.
What did you think when that opportunity came? It's like, were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously knew that they had been looking to transition. They had been owners for 20 years, and we knew that they were, interested in sort of starting to step away. I think it wasn't until, you started looking at legal documents and talking about financing and all that kind of stuff that it really hit home. And it was, a little bit overwhelming at first. And then it's just been a learning process since then. They gave us about a year's worth of lead time before we let anybody know that it was happening. So we had a lot of conversations, that were behind
so they
closed.
helped you transition.
Correct. So when we actually made the public announcement and sort of started day one, it wasn't really the first day. It had been a year up until that point.
Yeah, it's day one.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
So what are some of the things, can you talk about, like some of the challenges that maybe you weren't prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone in the world is struggling to find quality people. You know, there's a shortage in every industry that you can imagine. We're not immune from that. And because we hire specifically interior designers, that's a competitive market because we hire the same people that architecture firms do. So just finding people who sort of possess the same skill set and the interest in that sort of back end part of the project that we do has been a challenge. We found some great people in the last couple of years, but continues to be something that we need more staff because we've got plenty of work to go around. And then, as I mentioned, just the feeling of not really knowing what you don't know. So there are days that you're like, oh man, I didn't realize that this was going to be a problem that I would have to solve. So there's some days where you kind of feel like you're triaging things and not necessarily moving anything forward.
I don't think that's ever going to change.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, it's like there's always some
Yeah.
issue that has to be dealt with, I feel like.
Right.
Are the previous owners still around? Are they?
Yeah, so they actually still own all of our properties. And in our main building downtown, their condo is sort of the upper floor of our building where our showroom is. So they're physically adjacent to us. We can get a hold of them. And they certainly wanted to be around for at least the first 3 years as sort of an advisory position.
So how long ago did
we took possession of January of last year.
Can you talk about the market for contract furnishings? I mean,
Yeah.
It's really interesting in Kansas City. I mean, I'm sure every market's like this, but you know, the with people working at home, you're seeing a lot of space become available in Kansas City. You know, Sprint, well, T-Mobile now it has, you know, opened up a lot of space. Their campus out there. It seems like there's a wealth of space out there. So, you know, they can't get people in the offices. How is that impacting your business as well?
It's interesting to view from both angles because I do hear very much, you know, developers come into the city and say the office is dead forever. No one is ever going to build an office building ever again. We've got, you know, X million square feet of vacant space in the Kansas City metro right now. It's abysmal out there. But on the business side, we have stayed busy almost the entire pandemic and have seen an increase in sales since then for the reason that I mentioned, that a lot of people have moved and negotiated better leases. They're doing tenant improvement projects in pursuit of those environments that we talked about and creating more hospitable office spaces than maybe they were occupying previously. So there is still very much a market for furniture. It's not the big giant new Cerner campus potentially in the future, but I think there will always be people that are moving around or changing or growing or sort of taking the existing real estate and trying to improve it that keeps us busy.
You have one of the fastest growing organizations in Lenexa. I think it's Lenexa in Community America. Do you know Lisa Ginter?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
That would seem to me be a great connection for what you guys. They're growing like crazy.
Yeah. And actually their director of facilities used to be the facilities manager at H&R Block, and she was a customer of ours. So
awesome.
Yeah. Small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely want to hitch to that
Yes.
organization. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's switch gears. I'm going to switch
sure.
over here. We're going to go over to City of Lenexa.
Beautiful new website. It just came out about a month and a half ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So are there companies that just do websites for cities?
Yes, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of very specific information that has to be shared on a municipal government website. So there are specific.
Look at all the menus.
Yes, and being able to find something easily is paramount because this really is sort of the front door to the city. If someone needs to report a problem or figure out, you know, how to reserve a police officer for a parade.
Yeah.
Find an agenda for a city council meeting. There's just a wealth of information here. So there's contractors that do that specifically.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about. I mean, first, obviously we want to get to where you are now, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But what prompted you to run for city council?
Yeah. So in the process of changing careers and staying connected to the community, I also took on a leadership role in the local professional association, which is the International Interior Design Association.
Is that what's on your? Is that the
probably? Yep.
IIDA.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So got involved with the chapter here, moved into leadership and was president of the chapter here in Kansas City around 2014, 2015. There is another organization in Kansas City called the Center for Architecture and Design that is then the umbrella for all 7 of the professional associations like us, the American Institute of Architects, landscapers, urban planners. All of those organizations roll up into the Center for Architecture and Design. Wow. So after I was president of IIDA, I went on to become the president of the Center for Architecture and Design. And that was the time in which the public vote was active around the new airport project. And we had on our board a woman who was doing PR for Mayor Sly James's office. And she asked us as a, sort of design organization, sort of a stakeholder in the new airport project, if we would help promote that project and get out messaging about why people were having to vote on that, because a lot of people didn't understand why it was a public vote. So I worked with her, had some events at CFAD, did a little bit of, campaigning around the airport, and was invited to attend when the results came back on election night. So I was in the party with Mayor James and saw okay, that's pretty cool when you're involved in something that the public approves, and just knowing that, that would have been such a generational project.
So did you have your toe in the political?
No, I mean, that was the first, I'm using big air quotes, first campaign that I had ever worked on. And it really was just hosting a couple of events. But to see how the work of that campaign really is now changing the entire stratosphere of Kansas City, obviously was a very rewarding experience. After that, I really just started volunteering for other candidates in the 2018 midterms. There was a really compelling candidate that year that, I thought was very interesting. So I just kind of started going and knocking doors and writing postcards and the things that you do for campaigns. And by the end of that, a lot of people kind of started saying, well, maybe you should, you know how to do all this now. Maybe you should run for office. And in the process of helping that other candidate, I had actually spent a lot of time knocking doors in Lenexa and just asking people what was on their minds, and found that it was really municipal issues that they cared about the most. It wasn't, the big sort of controversial things that you talk about in national politics. So just understanding, sort of my background and what architects and designers, sort of have a say in the way the built environment goes together, it makes sense that city council would be a place to have a designer that could make some impact on the built environment. So I decided to run for city council. That was in 2019. There was a wonderful gentleman who was maybe thinking about retiring at the time, wasn't sure if he was going to run again, and I decided just to run and see if it would work, and it did.
Yeah.
So he actually ended up not running, so it ended up being an open seat, which was great because we ended up in a 3-way primary with 3 ladies running for the position. It was a wonderful experience to, just get out and talk to the community about what's important to them.
So how do you balance?
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one.
To do the chase a little bit with other things, but I mean, even back then, that takes a lot of time. Yeah,
that's kind of the number one thing that everyone asks me at cocktail parties or wherever I am. And I will say that, I never had kids. So I've had a lot of bandwidth throughout my career to be in service of professional organizations and volunteer time. And so this, has made sense because I had the space in my life to do it. I was sort of at the twilight of all of that professional association leadership, and I was looking for the next opportunity. So the two dovetail together to me.
Timing was perfect.
Yeah, yep. The timing just all worked out.
2019.
Yeah.
Right before COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, holy cow.
Yeah. I had about 3 months to sort of get
'Cause that would've been
oriented.
March, right?
Yeah. We
So-
got sworn in December, and then we go to a big conference twice a year called National League of Cities. And in March, it's always in Washington, D.C. And at that conference was when it started really getting strange. People were doing the elbow bumps and hand sanitizer everywhere. And they had members of the CDC come speak to us because it's a room of, 3,000 municipal elected officials about what's
What are
going
we gonna
on.
do? Yeah.
And I remember, we came home from the airport and I went to the grocery store and went home that night. And then that was it. It was like the curtain closed.
Well, that was a scary time.
It was.
We had a company leasing space from us here that actually helped the NCAA basketball tournament. So they worked for the NCAA.
Yep.
And I remember the gentleman coming out of the conference, he goes, "They just canceled the NCAA basketball tournament."
They called it March Sadness.
Yeah. Yeah. But they were an event company.
Right.
So he just instantly lost millions of dollars of revenue.
Yeah.
And it's like face is white, it was crazy time.
And then navigating all of that, as a very new council member, and sort of all of the conflicting information and, guidance and mandates and all that sort of stuff. It was definitely a challenge, but I always have to give credit to my colleagues and then my then mayor that, we always would have discussions respectfully and, be clear about what areas it was, what lane we needed to stay in as far as public health, because we didn't have a health department. So we weren't setting regulations. We were just following what was given to us. So I think that we fared as well as we could in communicating all of that and doing our best.
If you can make it through that,
then
I think you can make it through a lot of things. That
Thank you.
Prepared you for later
trial by
things,
fire.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think all of us. So you've been mayor for 8 months.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So how did that all come about? It's like that.
So very similar conversation around the same time as the business, where previous mayor was pretty sure that he was not going to run again. He had been serving in that capacity for 20 years and multiple years of council before that. And he was really looking for someone from the current council to replace him, and sort of tapped maybe 3 of us to have that conversation to just say, for the good of the city, someone with the institutional knowledge of the city should replace me, and we should, succession plan this. Yes. So there ended up being 2 of us internally from the council that ran last year. It's an awkward situation when it's one of your colleagues and someone that you consider a friend that you have to campaign against.
Yeah.
But we made it through, and that person is still on the council. We're thankful for still having his institutional knowledge to lean on, because we do now have some new council members as well. And, I have told, in my State of the City address and to staff and whomever that, at least for this first year, in the same way as the business, my job is to keep everything stable and not make changes, because it was the first time that we had a change in leadership in 20 years. So,
well, Lenexa is doing amazing.
Yes.
I wanted to talk a little bit, about the city center and that whole area out there. I know that area pretty well because my kids played baseball. So we were out at 3 and 2. We'd go there all the time and play baseball. Completely different now.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. It's really, really a cool area.
Yeah. It was a process that began in the late 90s with a process called Vision 2020. That was really a feedback process from our residents about what type of community they wanted. And they made very clear in that process that they wanted sort of a new, centrally located downtown. Old Town Lenexa obviously is very special to everyone. It's where the city was founded originally, but it is in the geographic east of the city, and the city continues to grow west. So the placement of City Center is actually the geographic middle. It can serve all of our residents now, and was really defined by that process as a sort of mixed use new downtown. So it took a lot of planning by my predecessors and other council members over those 20 years to see it through to what it is today. So I came in just right at the tail end.
Well, it's a perfect location. Right with the interstate right there, and 87th and 95th, and you've got bigger buildings, or companies, Keywood.
Yep.
And it's pretty amazing location.
Yep, the puzzle's kind of almost finished. There's not a lot of empty ground left over there. What you're seeing in the construction right now is there's a new Advent Health campus that's going there that will be equal in size to what you're familiar with at their Shawnee Mission location.
Oh, really?
So big hospital sort of at the back, and then a bunch of medical office buildings there out towards this center of City Center. And then sort of in the center of the donut, so if you think about Advent Health over here, and then the Shawnee Mission Aquatic Center, and then City Hall, and the rec center over on this side, sort of in the middle, we're getting ready to start on 2 new hotels with retail operation around the bottom of it. So we'll have a sort of fully built center.
Yeah, place for events,
visitors.
And things like that.
A lot of sports tournaments and swim meets and that sort of thing. Out of towners will have more places to stay as they visit that swim facility, and certainly the baseball fields and everything else.
One question I have for you is, I have my oldest son and his wife, just married 2 years, but buying a house is tough right now.
You bet.
And I feel like there are a lot of apartment buildings going up. Is that kind of a plan to give people a place to live for a while?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of apartments out in that area.
Our strategy is always to try to provide a mixture of inventory so that there is a choice for whatever sort of situation someone has. So we know that apartments go to young families who don't know exactly where they want to live yet. Sometimes when families separate and they want to keep the kids in the primary home, and that the other parent wants to live in an apartment. And then we actually hear from a lot of retired folks and seniors who just frankly don't want to take care of a single family home anymore, that they live in apartments and multifamily complexes now too. So there's a big mixture out there of people who find that type of development useful. We actually just passed last week our new comprehensive plan, which lays out the spaces in the city where we see that as appropriate land use for multifamily or high density housing. And then the rest of it, we're very clear about, this is sort of reserved, if you will, for single family housing, mixed use developments, that sort of thing. So we're communicating with developers in that way to say, still have got some little pockets left for it here, but want to be clear about where those things should go as we look at it from a city planning perspective.
Yeah, a lot of cities don't get that granular on planning things like that, I don't feel like.
Yeah, I mean, Lenexa has planning. I mean, as you've seen through the city center process, we start with really good plans and then we work the plans. So it's all very sort of not prescribed, but sort of what's the best word for that? Just sort of envisioned. And then we rely on our professional staff to sort of talk about what adjacencies make sense. You don't typically want single family homes built next to high speed interstates, that sort of where things fit within the community.
Right. Does it feel good being mayor?
Sure does.
I mean, walking in places.
Yeah. I mean,
hi, Mayor.
Yes. The, in both situations for me, I have been given an extraordinary organization to just keep stable. And I recognize the responsibility in both organizations to do that. And then, yes, I mean, just being a city that people feel well cared for and that they receive good value for their tax dollars and they aren't, calling the mayor screaming about things that they're unhappy about. That's something that we value very much and we take very seriously and want to continue to deliver, wonderful services to them.
What do your business partners think about this?
They, obviously were a little, unsure because all of this was happening all at once. But they sort of put their trust in me that I would be able to balance it. And they certainly recognize the exposure that the business gets, with me being out at every, chamber event and, every organization that invites me to attend something. I also get to say that I own Encompass. So hopefully, just having the name recognition will help the business too. Not that, I'm necessarily promoting it as the mayor,
right.
but
you have to be careful about that, probably,
correct.
don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
But just recognizing that I become sort of a public figure and have a wider audience is a benefit for them.
I was going to ask you about the Lenexa barbecue. It must be really cool. I mean, there's a lot of events. I was surprised at how many. That's the one I know pretty well.
Yeah, I actually wasn't able to make it this year because I had a friend who was getting married that weekend. But it, is something that people are very passionate about. People compete in that event very seriously. They use it as they use it as qualifying for other events, I believe. So, yeah, people take it very seriously.
So next year, if you need somebody to go, like in your place, just call me.
Yeah,
okay?
and we're always looking for judges. So for that and chili challenge, so I can keep you on the list
challenge.
for sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I bet there's some stuff. I probably couldn't even eat the chili. Some of that stuff's crazy.
Yes,
crazy hot. So what's we're about to wrap up. So what's the future of Lenexa? What are some? I don't know if you can talk about it at all, but what are some neat things coming down the pike that you can talk about?
Yeah. So like I said, we just passed the comprehensive plan last week. That was about a 3-year-long process that we, hired consultants and really did a deep dive on what the assets of our community are and what we expect them to be for the next 20 years. So we will have some policy changes that will come along with enacting that plan and just making sure that we're communicating clearly to the development community what we think that the future of the city looks like. So having that done is a very big accomplishment, something that we will now be able to work on for the next 20 years. And then we are opening this year an extraordinary number of projects that actually were delayed during COVID. So our the new aquatic center at Socorro Trails Park just opened here this summer. We are expecting the opening of our new Justice Center for the police and courts in August. And
where is that going to be?
It's 95th and Britain, kind of just south and west of City Center, again in the geographic center, so that police can respond in both directions.
Yeah,
right now,
the police are right.
Correct.
Across, your office is just across 87th,
yeah.
right?
So it is challenging if police have to dispatch all the way to the western border of the city from 87th and Monrovia. Yeah.
Quicker access
Correct.
to everybody.
Yes. And then we're doing a major renovation of the community center in Old Town. So part of that building is coming off. We're demolishing the current sort of outbuilding that's the senior center. We're moving that portion onto the existing building, reskinning the whole new thing, doing a big mural on the side. So 3 big projects that will be opening this year. And then once we sort of wrap with that and the police department moves, then we'll be moving into a study to study what's going to happen to the old city hall and police department site. We're looking at building a new fire station there, but just want to sort of understand what the land is and what we might do with that property.
I feel like I'm sitting in a Sim City video game here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we got to do this. We do this first.
Yep.
It's like actually thinking through those decisions is pretty amazing.
Resources are finite, and we know that we are using people's hard-earned money to build all those facilities. Yeah. So we plan those things in 5 and 10-year increments in our capital improvement program, and just making sure that when sort of buildings are reaching the end of their useful life, that we are replacing them or renovating them in a thoughtful way, and we're not overspending or over planning with the resources that we have.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank
This is really
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Before you go,
Yep.
I always have everybody do, I don't know if you saw the little video,
Okay.
but we have to do the movie voice because this is in a world with real media. So I'll give you a tip on how to do it.
Okay.
So you basically get really close to the mic.
Okay.
And you kind of talk with an airy voice,
Okay.
and you go, in a world with real media.
Okay.
So.
Is it supposed to sound scary?
No.
Okay,
No, it
'cause
just
that
sounds like,
kinda sounds scary.
Well,
Okay.
I did sound a little scary. maybe just a little bit more upbeat than
Okay.
in a world with real media.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
In a world with real media.
Awesome. You nailed it.
Thank you.
Last thing, is there if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or something like that, do you want to leave any information? I could put it in the show notes too. It's up to you.
Certainly anything city related, people can email me, jsayers@lenexa.com. Look for Encompass if you're looking for office furniture. I'm on all social media platforms. I have a public page and a private page and LinkedIn, and I'm out there everywhere. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Of
I
course.
really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. And if you'd like to join us or follow us, you can go to In a World with Real Media on our website. It'll be on LinkedIn. It'll be on Facebook, Instagram, places like that, YouTube. So be sure to subscribe. We'd love to have you follow us. Appreciate it.
This has been In a World with Real Media. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes and follow Real Media on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn so you never miss an episode.